So in case you miss the big yellow bright sign, this is the Hitchhiker's Guide to UXing without a UXer. And in case any of you don't know, this is me, and me. So my name is Chrissy Welsh, and I'm the lead UX for a company called Backbase. And we handle basically the front end for financial institutions like ABN AMRO and stuff. But precursor to that, I'm also one of the Cloud9 IDE alumni, so I was their UX over there as well before I started there. And my background is in working with development teams to really try and build great stuff. And this is what I wanted to talk about, which is sort of like the big elephant in the room as I like to think about it. I'm going to check my remote. Yay, I'm in control. Okay, so this is the big elephant in the room. And this is it here, right? And this is what I hear over and over and over again. I want to build great things. I start with really great intentions, but it always turns out rubbish. What happens? And this is a story I hear, and it's so prevalent in all the different teams that I work in. And this is how it happens. Is that you start at point A, and you want to build the best app. You want to build the best product in your little startup team. And you need to get to point B. And you think this is the way to do it. As quickly and as fast as possible. That's not necessarily the best thing. Because your great experiences and your happy users and your easy interfaces kind of live outside of that fast approach. So if you want to build great things, you kind of have to live a little bit outside of the fast approach to getting things done. And getting things done kind of looks like a big wavy line like this, if you want to do it really, really well. But I don't want you to panic about it. I don't want you to worry that you can still get things done and you can still do it in the right way without having to take the fast road all the time. And this is really what I want to talk to you just now. So I have about 20 minutes, so you've got to kind of keep your hat on because we're going to be going really fast. Is that I want to take you through how important it is to have a vision. And you just need the one, you don't need many. Just have one vision. I want to see how you sort of help you think like a user. Help you help your users. Why you should wireframe at all, and how to do it. How to make something throwaway, like a prototype. That allows you to test some of your hypotheses, allows you to test whether your idea is even good at all. How to evaluate that. And lastly, when you should scrap it if you need to scrap it. Because, slow sync. Because a journey of 1,000 miles always starts with one step. And for those of you who like Journey and have a PS2, this slide's for you. No one. Awesome. One person at the back. I like you. Okay. Okay. That's not good. Yay. Okay, so the vision. Do you have one for your product? If you don't have one, I would ask, why not? So whenever you started out with an idea of what you want to make, you tended to think a lot about what it should do and what it should be. And it's very important to keep that in mind, because if you take a step aside and you take a step away from it, what you get is feature creep. And you get lots of things being added in that don't necessarily adhere to what was going to be the great thing in the first place. Queen had a vision. One. Was a very nice record for those Queen fans. Anyone a Queen fan? Excellent. So this is what I want you to do, and this will keep you honest when it comes to your vision. I want you to print this out. And I want you to put it on your wall whenever you're going into your development environment. What one thing do you want your product, your service, your offering to do well? Just one. You can have, okay, I'll let you have one or two, but it should really do one thing really, really well. It should do one thing awesome. And you should know what that is, and it should be visible to everyone. I have mine for my entire team to see on the wall every single day, and it's A2, so it's not like A4, like stuck in the wall. It's really massive. And it makes sure that whenever we do something, we reference this back all the time. Because it should be simple until you make it complicated. The thing that you're building, the startup you have, it should start simple because it's very easy to add complications in. It's very difficult to keep things simple. So, starting with the user. Do you know who your users are? When you start with your product, when you start with your service, do you know who they are? Do you know what they're doing? Do you know what they're trying to do? Do you know why they're doing it? And if you want to be good at UX and you want to do this without a UXer, this is one of the top tips I can give you, and that is really think about who your users are. Write out who will be using your application or your website. Write out their age, their education, and then finally, I want you to name that person. In this case, we've got Arthur Dent here, for those that like Douglas Adams. Yay, woohoo! Bunny slippers, coats, funny t-shirt. Anyway. This is who the user is. And when you do this, they become real. So whenever you think, what would Arthur do in this situation? Would he want this? Would he want this feature if you're adding something new in? So why, crazy lady, are you making me name imaginary people? That's the second thing I get a lot from developers. Why am I creating imaginary people out of nowhere, and why are you making me do this? Because I want you to do this. I want you to fight for your users. And I'm mixing metaphors. But your users are what's going to make you popular. They're going to make you successful. They're going to use your application. They're going to use your product. They're the ones who are going to make it awesome for you in your job. And they're the ones that keep you in your job. They're probably the ones with the paid subscriptions. You've got to fight for them, and less so of the business needs, more for the user. So this is how simple your user persona, and we call them personas in the UX industry, but I won't bog you down too much with this kind of technical details, but this is Arthur's less attractive older brother called James. So this is James Dent, 32. I've written down some key goals for what he is. He knows what he wants to buy. His behaviors, he gets bored very quickly, so don't serve him fluffy product descriptions, and don't overwhelm them too much with choice because you're going to lose them. So this is basically if you have a website or service. And this is just a very simple example of how a persona or how a user that you can reference can be. It can be this simple. Okay, I'm going to stand next to my computer because my remote just lost connection. So what does it look like in real life? Well, it can look like this. This is a bit more complicated, but the point I'm trying to illustrate is there's really no right or wrong way to do persona work. It can be a couple of different ways. Or is this right? Whatever makes sense to you, whatever you understand the best. A couple of these have some benefits over others, but it really depends on how you understand your users and how you want to do it. Next thing I want you to do is start to wireframe. So before you touch a single piece of code with your awesome idea and your one vision and you know who's going to use it, I want you to hit the pen and paper. If you can do this, you can really get to grips with what you should be building. And wireframes are not about pretty pictures, they're about getting the functionality right, about what should be in there. And why on earth would you do that? Well, there's a couple of key benefits to wireframing that I can tell you. Really, really fast to lay things out, super fast. Imagine a wall of just A4 sheets. You can pull that together in 30 minutes, 40 minutes. You can iterate on that an even faster amount of time. It's super, super easy to see everything that you have, and you can iterate on it. You can pull sheets down, redraw it, put it back up again. You can have, this whole process doesn't have to be long, and it doesn't have to be involved, but it will help you get things right, and it'll help you get them right before you waste time and money on code, because it's cheaper than changing code. Changing pieces of paper is so much cheaper than changing code, paying for a developer to have to redo things. If you can hit it on the paper, then it'll save you a lot of time and effort. So again, this is about ideas, and this is about iteration. And I was kind of trying to illustrate a point, which is having one idea, super great. I'm glad you have one. I'm like right behind you in your corner clapping. Iteration in one idea, even better. You've taken that one idea and you've taken it a couple of steps further, and you've taken it to the pinnacle of what it can be. But you get a couple of ideas going, you iterate on them, and you can get something that is just super cool, ready for the vision that you had in mind in the first place. You iterate on something, and you go over it a few times, and you build it, you can have something which is exponentially better than the very first idea you had. Never ever hit code, if I can give you a tiny piece of advice with the first idea you get. Let it percolate, and go over a few things first. So what do wireframes look like? Well, I thought I would share one of mine. And the point I'm trying to make is they're not pretty, and they're not there to be pretty. They're there to be functional. And for any of you that have used Cloud9 ID in the past, this was one of the dialog boxes I had done for Cloud9. And it's a complicated piece of dialog box with lots of bits that you can't read in my scribbly handwriting. But trust me, it's all golden. And what does it turn into? Well, with a visual designer, it can turn into something like this before a programmer works on it. But it just means that whenever you start work, you've got it right the first time. Can you imagine having to iterate on this 3, 4, or 5 times before you get it right? The developer would be shooting me in the back if I turned my back on him for too long. But what if you really hate paper? You're allergic to it, you absolutely can't stand it, or you had a really bad experience in art class and you never want to touch a piece of paper again? Well, don't panic. You can use software too. There's software like Balsamiq. If any, who knows Balsamiq? Oh, you're just damn awesome. I love you. Who likes it? Less people. Okay. Right. So this is Balsamiq, and it allows you to do some very fast iterations on sort of layouts and designs. You can throw things into there, you can export it as PDF or PNG, and that allows you to do multiple things, print them out, put them on the wall, use them as prototyping, link screens together. There's a whole heap of things you can do with it. This one, again, it's a Cloud9 example, and it was doing a flow diagram for how you can actually get through from one screen to the next and what you actually have to show at each stage. And there's lots of little virtual sticky notes, because I like sticky notes. So some wireframing tools that you can use. So you're not limited to pen and paper or Balsamiq. There's actually a whole heap of things. It depends what you're comfortable in, I guess. And there's no hard and fast rules as long as you do it at some point. And that is pen and paper would be my number one, because it's super fast and super cheap. If you're allergic to pen and paper, you can use Balsamiq. And if you really hate Balsamiq, you can go back to pen and paper, as most of the room seems to do. There's UXer as well, but that's super expensive. It's like 6,000 euros or something like that for UXer. So unless you're a corporate company, I would avoid that one. And then there's your usual Photoshop Illustrator. So I'll tell you, if you're going to show wires to a client or wireframe to a client, never, ever, ever show them paper. Never, ever. They will not understand it. I have 2 stories for that. I showed the clients some paper. I spent a whole week doing these really great mock-ups, and I was thinking they'll get it. They'll understand that the idea is golden and it's solid. They looked at paper and went, why are you writing on paper? I don't understand. What are we paying you for? Conceptually, they don't really understand it. So if you're going to show a client something, try to go as high fidelity as possible. And by high fidelity, I mean like as visual as you can with it. But I also have a story about that. I showed a client once really high fidelity wireframes because of that first experience, and I went, I'm not going through that again. So I went and showed some really awesome Photoshop-like wireframes, and these things were cool. And do you know what happened? They liked the wireframes so much it ended up being how it would look. So the wireframes in grey and white, I kid you not, was what they wanted to produce at the end because it was so high fidelity. So I would take the middle road, not one or the other, or you're in dangerous territory at the other end. And Envision app. Who knows Envision app? A couple of people started around the back. If you don't know it, it's really great. You can link flat screens like PNGs or JPEGs or whatever you want. It's really super cool. And you can create like little prototypes for yourself. And you can share those with people. So you can link those bad boys up. And that's going to be good. So what does a prototype look like? Well, you know how I made you do all those wireframes earlier and you've got all these bits of paper? Well, guess what you can do with them? You can make prototypes with them. And you can actually shuffle those bits of paper around, ask people to click on them, ask for feedback, say, do you know where you're going? Give them a task to do, give them the paper, and you move the paper around and see if they do a task. Now, if you're wondering what that looks like, it looks like this. So you have little pieces of paper. They can be drawings, they don't have to be printouts, just in case you're wondering. And you just shuffle them around, and you ask people to use your finger as the mouse, and you can click on things. And this is a really nice, easy, fast, cheap way, especially if you're a bootstrapped company, very cheap to do this. And this is kind of people working their way through their wireframes, and you can see some confused faces. You will see that a lot if you do this, but you will also catch a lot of your problems and your functionality by doing this very small step and actually showing something earlier. There's a great quote I heard, and that was, if you're uncomfortable showing your work, you're at the right stage to show it. So if you're uncomfortable showing it, that's the point where you should be doing it, because you'll catch all the bugs and things earlier in your own designs. And this is Envision apps. This is what I was telling you about. So if you want to link those screens and you have flat screens already, great tool to do it. Creates little hotspots. You can click on things, link them together. Works really well. Works really cool. And if anyone wants to see these things, I have live examples, so I can take you over to the hallway out there, and I can show you stuff as well if you're really curious about it. So far, I've made you print a vision on a wall, which you're all very happy. You've got your one vision, just like Queen. You've got, you know who your users are, and you can reference them. You've got some wireframes that you've turned into a clickable prototype. Now what are you going to do? Well, I want you to evaluate your own work. I want you to put the shoes on of that James Dent, Arthur's less attractive older brother. And I want you to think like him whenever you look at your work. It doesn't have to be a bad. I'm just trying to make a point. And when you think about them, I want you to really see if you can be that person, be that user, and evaluate your work. It's great to get other people in or segment groups, but that's costly. And this whole talk is about bootstrap startups and how to get started quickly. So, put on the shoes of the user, evaluate your work. Other ways you can do to gather data, there's a great tool. It's called Usability Hub. It's a karma-based system. So you evaluate other people's work, they evaluate yours, and you get really, really awesome feedback. And it helps, and this is not a very involved process, but it is testing, and it's good testing. And again, you can use these kind of flows and diagrams and A/B splits to actually get some really cool stuff going. So, this is why we're doing all this, right? It's because greatness, and real true greatness, does not take shortcuts. And it's true, it doesn't. There's no quick way to A to B, but I can get the process down a lot shorter and smaller so that you can get to greatness a lot faster. But it does require a bit of work and a bit of thinking. So what if you can't evaluate that work fairly yourself? What if you can't conceptualize and you just can't evaluate what you're trying to do? You look at it and it looks okay to you, but you get the feeling it's maybe not. So what happens if you can't do it by yourself? You need to find a friend. Maybe not these friends. I don't think Courtney Cox is going to evaluate your application for you. But if you have a friend, bring them in, try not to tell them anything about what you're doing, and get them to sit down and use what you're building. If you're uncomfortable showing what you've got, you're probably doing it right, because you're getting that feedback early. And this is somewhat what it looks like. So you've got to sit at the back and say nothing. And they're going to sit at the front, and they're going to do a couple of tasks that you set them, or they're going to talk to you about what they think about what they're saying. And then you get to write down, or you get to say nothing, but just take notes. And the best advice I can give you is to say and do nothing and try to give nothing away, because a user will try to please you. So someone that you get in, even your friend, will try to do it right. And that can be dangerous, because they'll want to make sure that your product is good, but what you really want is fair feedback. So the less you say at this point, the better. So what really happens when it doesn't go as expected? So you've done all this hard work, right? And you've got the evaluation back, and actually the evaluation gave you something like this. probably because you didn't stay true to your one vision. You've had 1, 2, 3, 4 visions in there or something, and you've got a bit of a Frankenstein's monster of a product or service that does nothing really very well. Well, at this point, you really need to think about your own work, right? So you need to think about this. Are you going to keep it or are you going to bin it? And this is when I was trying to tell you about earlier, is that it's a process, and if it's a fast process, then you can get to this point a lot faster, is that there's no point in spending 6 months of your life developing something that isn't great, or isn't going to be great. And it's much better for you if you bin it early than it is if you keep going. So please don't get too attached to your projects. They can sometimes feel like your little baby that you have, your golden child that's going to become the next Jesus. But it's probably better that you are able to evaluate your work and see if it is good, because the next great idea could be just around the corner for you as well. So, is this everything I have to tell you about user experience? Well, no. There's a whole lot more to it than this. But if we're talking about getting the basics right, and we're talking about building something really, really super awesome, then this is going to help you get started really quickly and really well. It's going to get you to the point where you could probably hire a professional in to do this for you. And if I can make any recommendation to someone, is that they don't do it themselves, so you actually get a professional in. But if you do, if you have to, then please do these steps. So here's what we just covered in a very fast, lightning-style fashion, which is how important it is to have one of your visions and print it on your wall and make it visible so that everything you do, you reference back to that. How you can think like a user, which is take those steps to write down who they are. Name them, please. Reference them whenever you think about your features. I want you to think about wireframing. I want you to think about getting the functionality of what you're trying to do right. Make sure all those steps are in place. If you need to think about the edge cases, please do, but make it work for the 80% of your users first. And then the last 20% you can make work with the edge cases. How to make a throwaway prototype, which is use those wireframes, use those papers, reuse them, and actually make a finger-clickable prototype that you can use. How to evaluate your own work, which is take a step back and really think about your user and if it fits their needs. And finally, when you need to scrap it, which is after that evaluation process, if it didn't go well, you need to really think about whether you should carry on. So long and thanks for all the fish. I will be taking questions, so I think I did that in super fast time, so I'm free for some questions, or not? Yeah. Okay, a couple of minutes. Anyone have any questions about all that lightning fast speed? There's a hand behind the cameraman. Han, you can go.
Yeah, so something you said about the prototypes.
Yes.
It's something the opposite of what other UX people say.
Okay.
So to give this as high fidelity as possible when showing to clients. And a lot of people say the opposite. It's that if they show something high fidelity to the client, they will meet less understanding that this will take a long time to build. Because if we're looking for finish, then why are you going to spend time on this?
Okay, so what you're saying to me is that whenever you're saying that clients need to see something of a high fidelity, or clients need to see low fidelity, because then they understand that it's going to take longer to build?
These other people have said that they have such bad experiences that they have decided to just show the lowest fidelity they can.
See, that's like a workaround for a different problem. That's someone showing low fidelity because they can't explain to the client how long it's going to take to actually build. So that sounds more like a communication problem than what you should actually do with your user experience. But when it comes to low fidelity, the benefits of it are that it's throwaway and it's fast. High fidelity takes longer to do. So whenever you do things at a higher level of design, it's ready to be built, it's ready to pass to a developer. But you should be getting that feedback much earlier on. If you're talking about clients, then you should be getting the feedback for what you're building at a medium to high fidelity stage. If you show something too finished, like I was saying in my early example, they actually think that's what they're going to get because the design hadn't touched it yet. That's sometimes what you end up building. But my advice would always be what I just stated, which is use the low fidelity internally. Use it for yourselves. It's not for show to other people. when you get to a medium or you're iterating on that to look a little better, and it can look a little better in like balsamic or any kind of digital tools. Low fidelity I consider to be paper. Medium I consider to be balsamic or like lines and boxes in Illustrator. And when it comes to high fidelity, I consider that to be almost finished designs in Photoshop. So I would take the middle part and I would show that to clients. That would be my advice.
Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Chrissy.
Hi.
I have a question.
Shoot.
What are, you, in your experience, the signals that tell you whether a UX design, from a developer perspective, there are other signals, but from a UX designer, design is a throwaway or it can be improved? Like, what are the markers you...
If every single user has turned around to you and said, I don't understand what I'm doing, I don't understand what this serves or what purpose this is, then that would be a surefire sign that you need to stop what you're doing because no one is getting it. No one's getting the idea or the vision. But if people are saying, oh, I see it now, I can get, it comes down to the feedback. It comes down to interpretation of the feedback that you get. So if you get some positive parts inside the feedback, then you can carry on. But if everything you're getting comes back negative, that would be the point where I would say, this is not really going to work, or they don't get what I'm trying to do. So maybe what you've done doesn't go to the vision of what you were trying to create.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
More questions? Yeah?
So would it be fully at the end when you finally get around to making like an actual prototype? Because like I followed this model before and I find it quite waterfall. Like
Yeah.
it gets to the stage of the build, and by the time that you get to the end of the build, everything's had to change because of various things of this. And I tend to find when you get to the stage where you're making like a clickable prototype, these days most people can make it just as fast in something like Bootstrap and make something that's actually real. Most people I've worked with in UX have found that a lot better to do it that way.
Yeah.
Like to actually make something real so people can use a computer, click around, as opposed to just imagining what it might be like.
Yeah, I'm with you there. If you're actually much more versed, or you have a dedicated UX professional, that is the way to go. If you don't have that, then I would much recommend you don't have to do clickable prototypes. You can do them on paper before you start the development cycle if you don't have someone like me in your team. But I work in an agile team, so it's not this waterfall way. It is an iterative process, and you do go through. In fact, I've worked in lean teams before where you're on your own even. But the answer to your question is, if you have a dedicated UX person, then what you're describing is absolutely 100% true. If you don't have a dedicated person, which is what this talk is for, then these steps will help you keep things honest, keep things good.
Also, you can use Top Coat instead of Bootstrap.
You can use lots of
Just throwing
things.
that out
You can
there.
use lots of frameworks. We're not exclusive.
I've got a question, so
Shoot.
I'm just going to selfishly jump in. How do you feel mobile impacts this? Do you guys do like mock-ups and wireframes for like all the possible screen sizes when you're building stuff out?
The answer is I generally do. Depends on what you're building. If it is cross-device, if it's mobile, tablet, desktop, then yes, of course, you have to factor that in. And there's actually really cool things if you're working in paper. Their Post-its have now got the mobile size because they understand that people use them now whenever they're wireframing. So you can even get Post-its in tablet and mobile now, and you can just draw them on, and they're the right size for you to work on. So you don't even need to like work out what the sizes are anymore. So the answer is yes. There is lots of strategies for UX to work on, which is mobile first, which is a popular one. But I would generally work, if it's cross-device, yes, of course. I would work on what the core functionality would be and put that in the smaller devices first. But you've got device appropriateness as well, which is some things are not appropriate per device. So for example, if you're doing, I'll just give you a recent one, loan application forms, not appropriate for mobile. However, information on loan application forms are more appropriate tablet and desktop. So it's sometimes you have to not always go, well, this is essential for mobile, but what's appropriate per device as well. And that factors into the UX process too. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Totally.
Okay, cool.
More questions? Oh, yeah. Last question, I think.
Last question. And I'll be out in the hallway for any more questions. If you want me to look at anything, I'm here to help you. So if you need any advice.
So you're talking about the user personas and
Yeah.
breaking that down and really digging into who your user base is. Do you have anything to say about when you're seeking feedback, how best to, or if it makes sense to go after specific representatives from that user base?
Yeah. There is a more involved process where you can go after the segments that you've described. You can go after that 30-year-old value hunter, for example, or something that you really want to go for. And you have to make your own judgment as to how you categorize those people. So yes, of course, you will get better results if you do that. But it's better to get any feedback than none. So it's better to just get some feedback than no feedback. No feedback is the death of whatever you're doing, but some feedback will help you, and even better than that is exactly what you described, which is targeted feedback. But that takes a long, more involved process, and again, if you don't have a dedicated UX professional, then any feedback's better than none.
Awesome. Thank you, Chrissy.
You're very welcome.